listening to the Agent Survival Guide podcast, a podcast for today's insurance agents. Informing, educating, empowering, improving the way you do business in an industry that's anything but static. In today's episode, there's not much time left on the books for 2023. At least by my best efforts to keep track, which right now is a bit tough. We are in that weird holiday time warp, so what better time to talk about some podcast recommendations? It has been a minute since my last update this summer, so let's all take a break. Whether that's a coffee break or a cookie break, I will not judge. Let's take a break and talk podcasts. Number 1. First on my list today, the weekly serial from Rob Reiner and Soledad O'Brien, Who Killed JFK? The podcast aims to answer that question, and it is hard to believe this year was the 60th anniversary of JFK's death. The show puts together a lot of information that was previously housed in separate places. There are interviews with CIA officials, medical experts, journalists, eyewitnesses, even the former Secret Service agent who came forward in 2023 with new evidence. It's an interesting premise. Rob Reiner interviews the guests and asks them questions, while Soledad O'Brien acts as a check to balance out Reiner, asking her own questions and serving partially as narrator to keep the story moving forward. In press releases for the show, I've seen that Reiner claims 4 men are responsible for killing JFK. Those names will, of course, only be revealed in the series finale, episode 10, which should come out on January 10th, as long as the holidays don't disrupt publication. Number 2. Next up, we've got another nonfiction mystery documentary, this time from the BBC and superfan James Peake, The Banksy Story. This show came out over summer 2023 and was a fascinating look at the history behind the beloved graffiti artist. I'm not sure that the effort behind this podcast was really to unmask Banksy. I can honestly say that for as long as Banksy doesn't want us to know who he is, I don't want to know his real identity. I love the fact that he's chosen to stay anonymous for whatever reason that is. But I was still curious to learn more about the artist and his work, and this podcast was a very fun and respectful way of exploring that information. Number 3, back to fictional podcasts. We'll start out with Ad Lucem. This show came out in summer 2023 as well, and it's an interesting story. It is set in a near-future society similar to ours, where a company called Ad Lucem OI is about to release a virtual augmented reality assistant who can respond to clients in real time. And that's because Kara, the name for the virtual assistant, is controlled by a real human being. We join the story as the company plans to launch a massive upgrade to Kara, and things start to go wrong. I don't want to spoil too much of the plot, but the show stars Chris Pine, Olivia Wilde, Troyan Bellisario, and Joshua Close. All of the episodes are currently out, so if you prefer to binge listen, you can definitely do that with Ad Lucem, and honestly, I can't say that I would blame you. The story is that good. Number 4, this next podcast, I am still working my way through, and I believe I clicked on follow because it was described as a steampunk sci-fi. The Kingmaker Histories is set in the early 1900s. Our main character starts out the show by suffering a migraine, revealed to be a powerful gem that a sorceress stashed inside her skull when she was just a baby. All Colette wants is for someone to get the gem out of her skull, but that proves easier said than done. There is magic, mystery, aliens, and quite a bit of thievery. It sounds strange to say all of those things in one sentence and put them in a steampunk setting and somehow think that that would be conveyed in a way that makes any sort of sense. but somehow the writers of the show have managed it and also managed to write compelling characters. Like I said, I am still working my way through the series. There are 2 seasons, and episodes come out roughly every 2 weeks. Number 5. Up next, we've got a podcast that slipped under my radar until a couple of days before Halloween. It's another podcast by GZM Shows. Gen Z Media is the premier fiction podcast network for kids. I have talked about them and their shows many times. Couple examples: Mars Patel, 6 Minutes, Mother Nature, Remy's Life Interrupted, Annie, Nightingale. All fantastic podcasts, and we're adding Mina and Lucy's Guide to Slaying Dracula to the mix. It's a fresh take on the story of Dracula, and the premise is 2 best friends who have bonded over the loss of their parents. Dr. Van Helsing is the grandfather to one of the girls in this adaptation, and the story begins the night before Halloween when a strange ship arrives in Whitby Harbor. Mina and Lucy explore, things start to get weird, especially with the arrival of a mysterious new student named Vlad. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but as they say in the opening credits, the show is loosely based on Dracula, and it has plenty of twists and turns that keep the story intriguing. For our bonus today, there are 2 podcasts I've mentioned before on the show that recently released their 2nd seasons. The first, Aftershock, continues the story of the fictional earthquake that destroys part of the West Coast and brings a mysterious island to the surface. When survivors head to the island, they find a lot more questions than answers, along with a mysterious illness. In the 2nd season, we get a few new characters, along with a glimpse of how the earthquake and subsequent events changed life on the mainland, in addition to heading back to that mysterious island. And then the other podcast previously mentioned, Case 63. I had said when I talked about it the first time that I was hopeful for a sequel, and we got one in early fall this year. Season 2 continues the story of Dr. Eliza Knight, a psychiatrist who finds her life changed after interacting with a patient played by Oscar Isaac's character, Case 63. In the first season, he informed her that he was a time traveler from the year 2062, sent back in time to save the world. The 2nd season is a direct continuation of the first season, very similar premise, and I can't say too much more without spoiling either season. But Case 63 is a quick listen. Season 1 is just under 2 hours, and Season 2 comes in at just over 2 hours. So it is a great quick binge listen if you like that sort of thing. That is all I've got for this episode. We will be linking to all of the shows I mentioned in the notes, so be sure to check that out. We will also have links to our other recommendation episodes. We've got quite a few that we have done so far, so if you missed any of those, you can catch up with the list in the notes and get a couple more podcast recommendations. While you're taking a look at the episode notes, make sure you're following along with our show. We've got a lot of great episodes planned for 2024, and we don't want you to miss out on what's coming next. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next episode. The Agent Survival Guide podcast is a production of Ritter Insurance Marketing, an Integrity company. This episode was written and produced by me, Sarah Ruppel. Script proofing by Tina Lamoureux. Podcast design by Urban Rivera. Artwork by Vivian Zhao. Follow along with our show wherever you like to listen. Rate and review our show on Apple or Spotify.